Welcome back to She Makes It Work with Gabby and Abby. Today we are talking about time management. You may notice that I am missing my co-star, Abby. This week she is in Austin for Texas Streaming where she is speaking, which is very exciting. That also means that I get to talk to you all about time management, which is, as always, one of my favorite topics. You may be wondering why I should be talking to anybody about time management. And the reason is that I am considered to be very productive by everybody who knows me, and especially the people who work with me. So in my regular day job, I usually have a few different hats that I wear, and I manage to juggle those very, again, productively. And then that also includes in my personal life, I've been able to hold down a very intense full-time job while rising in leadership roles, while also writing and publishing multiple books, as well as writing, producing, directing, and publishing multiple fiction podcasts. And I do that partially through very, very strong time management skills. For me, time management has always been a little bit easy, but I would say that over the last 20 years, I've definitely increased my skills in that area. So I know it's something that can be improved on, especially if you get some of these big tips and tricks. And I think that time management makes people feel or helps people feel really in control of their lives. So I'm going to teach you how to do it. And one last thing before we dive into it, which is that I've noticed with people that there's a certain amount of shame for people who haven't truly mastered time management. I've talked to quite a few people who struggle with it, and I have noticed that they have this kind of deep feeling of shame. They think they should be better at it. The shame shows up differently for different people. For some people, that might look like kind of avoiding the topic in general. And for other people, it might be by thinking that they are actually better at time management than they are and not stopping to examine whether they could be better at it. I've actually met a few people in my life who tell me this is one of their strengths when in reality, they're constantly showing up late to meetings, they're late on deadlines, and they just seem frequently overwhelmed. I think one of the first reasons that people struggle with time management is that they let their schedule control them versus truly taking control of their own schedules. Taking control of your schedule means you're not just reacting to meeting invitations that get sent to you and then you kind of structure your day around other people sending you meetings. It means recognizing that in order to truly be good at time management and in order to truly, frankly, master your role and be productive, you have to look at your schedule as something that you're in control of. And so that can include declining meetings, it can include blocking off time, but just really sitting down and instead of being reactive and just juggling all the meetings everybody invites you to, just truly understanding. I think it's just really an understanding and a sense of clarity that you should be the one in control of your calendar. And from that understanding comes the ability to implement some of the other things we're about to talk about. So when it comes to time management, the number one reason that most people struggle with it is because they genuinely don't know how long their activities take, their core activities, things they do often. And that can start with just getting ready in the morning. I think everybody has an idea of how long it should take them to get ready in the morning. And I think what happens is people get really fixated on that idea of how long something should take. And then they never stop to question, is that actually how long it takes? And I start with the morning because I think that that's where you can get a lot of bleed in your time is getting ready to leave the house in the morning, especially if you have kids, especially if you have a husband or other partner. It is really easy for those family activities can throw off what time you're leaving the house. So getting ready to me isn't just the act of putting on makeup and doing hair. It's literally everything you need to get out the door in the morning. And I think people underestimate each step. So they underestimate the makeup and hair part. They underestimate the breakfast for the kids part. And so they're always rushing to get out the door. And unfortunately, that's a really easy way to get some bleed. And then it also sets you up to be, frankly, really stressed out for the rest of the day because you were rushing to get out the door. I think that's the easiest example, but other examples are drive time, like not factoring in drive time to and from like a lunch or some sort of meeting, and not factoring in parking time, and just really not sitting down and thinking about how much that activity takes end to end. Well, Google Maps tells me it's going to take me 25 minutes, so it's 25 minutes. Okay, well, you need to get in the car and leave the garage garage and you need to park where you're going and find the door and find the meeting room. And those things, again, add up if you're just not factoring in enough time for the activities. And instead, people focus on the core activity and they focus on how long they think that core activity should take them. And it's just usually not accurate enough. And again, when it comes to time management, that 5 to 10 minute slip can really impact your day. And it can impact how you feel about yourself and your level of preparedness. It's a distraction from truly showing up on time and presently for the thing you're trying to do. And it does impact people's perception of you. Whenever someone's like consistently late, I do start to think that they can't manage themselves and that they don't care enough to improve on this. So really think hard about, am I one of those people? Get some feedback if you're not sure. And, because I have met people who think they're very good at this and are constantly late to meetings. And I enjoy those people and I accommodate them, but it's a friction point, and I think we all need less friction points in our lives. So what can you do to get better about this? It's going to sound nerdy, but it's just like when you are trying to get better at your eating, you have to actually write down and track it. And so if you suspect that this might be something you're struggling with, I highly recommend actually keeping a time log. And in that time log, write down how long it takes you. And if you have 20 steps to get out the door, don't waste time writing down how long each 20 steps take, but really write down it, from the time I woke up, it took me 45 minutes to leave the house. From the time I woke up, it took me an hour and a half to leave the house. Whatever it is, really just track it. And then if you need to squeeze time, do. But I would say just start with measuring. And one of my favorite phrases is we can't manage what we don't measure. And so measurement is the first part of it. And again, that's why when you're starting like a healthy eating journey, one of the first things they tell you to do is keep a food log. So I would say it's the same discipline, just making sure you're keeping a time log. The next reason people struggle with time management is because they don't factor in buffer time. Buffer time is huge because things are going to happen. You're not going to perfectly hit how long something takes every single time. So I always factor in 5 to 10 minutes of buffer time before I leave the house. So if I have to leave this house at 10 a.m. for something, I work from home. That's probably clear when I say 10 a.m. If I have to leave the house by 10 a.m., I plan to be ready no later than 9:45. And that is in case something happens that slightly delays me leaving the house, or it's in case something slightly delays me on the way or when I get to my destination. So what that means is I set 10 a.m. as a no later than time for leaving, for example. And if I'm ready at 9:45 and I can walk out the door, I do. And so that buffer time then allows me to be early. I'm famously early for a lot of things. And here's a little tip about being early. Don't make it someone else's problem. Just like you don't want to make being late someone else's problem, you do not want to make being early someone else's problem. So a lot of times when I'm early, I don't even tell people because I don't want to rush them. I don't want to pressure them. That's just my own thing. And I do that because I'm often going places that I haven't necessarily been before. So in my world, you could be visiting different clients all the time. They always have weird parking. They always have weird security. And whenever I'm in these meetings, I'm always shocked at how many people don't factor in extra time for the unknowns of entering a new building because they're all different. Like it might be a parking garage where you have a ticket, and then leaving, you might have a parking attendant where you have to pay and you might have to wait in a line. You need to factor those times in too for leaving that meeting to go to your next meeting or to go to your destination. So as much as possible, build in buffer time. And another example of buffer time is that if I am going somewhere, let's say it's a breakfast meeting, a lunch meeting, or a client meeting, or just a meeting at a building, I always try to not schedule a meeting, not just directly after that, but within 25 minutes. So let's say it should take me 25 minutes to drive home from wherever it is. I'm not scheduling my next meeting to start 25 minutes later as much as possible, right? And again, this goes back to you have to understand that you have control of your schedule in order to feel empowered and enabled to implement this. Because you have to genuinely feel like you have the right to manage your schedule in a way that you can show up successfully. So just sit with that for a minute. You have to be able to manage your schedule so that you can show up successfully and show up well. And for me, I don't show up well. I don't feel comfortable if I'm running in 2 minutes late, or I'm flustered because I parked in my garage and I have to run into my home office to get dialed into the meeting. That's not good. And so, like I said, as much as possible, I try and schedule a larger buffer when I'm driving back from somewhere in the Metroplex to try and get to a meeting on time. Related to estimation and buffers if you work from home, for example, and you're going somewhere during the Metroplex during the business day, or any Metroplex. I'm not saying this specific to where I am, but just anywhere that has traffic. Or if you're just going somewhere that you're less familiar with, even if you do not work from home and you leave your house frequently, unlike me, it's still good to make sure that you're estimating your drive time based on a traffic drive time versus a no traffic drive time. An example of this is I was having a breakfast meeting with one of my direct reports and one of her direct reports. And we were in an area of town that I personally don't normally go to, but I scheduled my buffer time. I did all the things and I was there as always a few minutes early. She was there on time. So we sat down and then we got a text message from her direct and he was running late, and he was running late because he had looked at the drive time estimate when there was no traffic instead of looking when it was morning rush hour traffic during a workday. So he ended up being 25 to 35 minutes late for a breakfast meeting, which is really unfortunate. It was a really good opportunity to get FaceTime with his leadership. And I had gone out of my way to schedule this breakfast with him because he was feeling just a little insecure about a few things and needed just a little extra attention. So the whole point of the meeting was for me to be able to connect with him and give him some of this reassurance he was looking for and to really take care of him as a part of my team. So it's just really, I felt really bad for him because he was worried and stressed at showing up late and he was frazzled, and I could tell it kept him from being fully present in the moment, but also he missed out on 30 minutes of being able to just kind of casually talk because, of course, we all had client meetings after that. So we still had to end the breakfast on time and leave on time. So we didn't get as much time together as we wanted. And that's not something I held against him, but I just felt bad for him. I'm like, if I were in his shoes, I would feel stressed and I'd feel bummed and I would kind of worry about the optics of how I was showing up to my leadership. And I reassured him it was fine, but that just stays with me as an example of plan for how long it takes to do something at the time you'll be doing it. The next issue I see quite frequently with people in time management, I would say with some people, is just trying to do too many things. You're really trying to do too much. You're overcommitted. You're trying to squeeze everything in. And at some point, it's just not possible. And it also becomes more stress than it's worth. And that's coming from me, where I pride myself on also doing too much. I love it. I love being busy. I had to accept that I wasn't my best self when I was overcommitted, and again, use that feeling of empowerment to take charge of my schedule. Because what I would do when I was overcommitted is I would just try and get more and more and more perfect at the scheduling and the time management and all the other tips I'm giving you. When at some point you just have to recognize this is too much. This is too much I'm trying to squeeze into one day. That is a symptom of overcommitment, but it can also be a symptom of poor prioritization, which is what I see with some folks in my life and some people I work with, which is that it's not just that they're overcommitted, it's just that they're trying to do everything, and they're trying to do everything at a certain level of quality that just isn't feasible with the available hours in the day. And again, that leads to stress and burnout because you can only be super crisp and controlling about your schedule for so long before it really starts to wear on you and wear on the people around you. And again, I've been guilty of that repeatedly, which is making my overscheduling someone else's problem. Not because I'm flaky or anything like that, but just because I do have to be really crisp about start and end times because I'm constantly having to move on to the next thing. And so I have noticed that because of that, sometimes meetings are a little rushed, and it would be nice if I had more room in my day to take some more time on things. And so I would just recommend against overcommitting, as always, but also just really being mindful of asking yourself, am I overextended? Am I trying to do too much? Even if my level of commitment is okay, this is my job and this is what's required of my job, sit down and honestly ask yourself, of all the things I think I have to be doing, are they all equally important? And I'll talk a lot about this on the show and in various episodes and in courses, which is that prioritization, I think people really just focus on prioritization as a tool for sequencing activities. Very rarely do people use it as a tool for whittling down their activities. And so if you're really clear about what your priorities are, then you can be, frankly, a little bit ruthless in paring down your list. So that list of things that you're trying to get done and trying to squeeze into your day more accurately reflects your priorities. And those priorities should be a reflection of your goals. And so there's going to be times where certain goals are more important than others. And so you may show up more or less well in different areas of your life depending on what those goals are. For example, I was going after a certain promotion and I told my husband at the time, I was like, I really would love this promotion because it's going to mean great things for our family. That does mean I'm going to scale back my home responsibilities a little bit. And, we talked about, does that mean getting a little bit more help, or do some things just slide for a while, or instead of me doing something every third day, I do it every fifth day. But you have to be actively engaged in thinking about what your goals are in order to then prioritize correctly. And again, prioritization isn't just sequencing the work, it's deciding what doesn't need to be on the list. Some things need to go. And maybe use the Marie Kondo technique. That might be a fun way to do it, which is, does this activity spark joy? And I know, and is this activity necessary? So when you Marie Kondo, there's the joy and then there's the necessary part as well. But do that when it comes to what you're trying to schedule, because something's got to give at some point. Like I know people who are starting small businesses, which is a fairly time intensive activity, and they're trying to maintain the same pace with their social commitments. That doesn't always work. And in fact, similarly, I've worked with people who were trying to get promoted and they were very overextended socially and showing up to work hungover and tired. I know you wouldn't think that, but people make these choices and that's not aligning with their goals. Like their goal was they wanted to get promoted. They wanted to advance their career. And unfortunately, the choices they were making were not in alignment with their goals. They were prioritizing the wrong activities. It was impacting their work and frankly, holding them back, which as we all know is a big theme for me, is what's holding you back. So just really be mindful about focusing on priorities that align to your goals and trying to whittle down your activities as much as possible, including deferring some of them, asking for a little bit more help in some places, accepting that your quality isn't going to be as good on certain things. Maybe you're not making as fancy of a dinner, but you're still feeding your family. And that's a way to lighten the load a little bit. Or if it comes to your work activities, let's say that you are a highly driven person with high standards. Sometimes it means accepting, hey, whereas I normally try to hit like a 9 on a scale of 1 to 10 of quality on this deliverable, I'm going to have to be okay with a 7. And everybody around me is going to be okay with that too, because I'm the only one holding myself to this standard anyway. Not saying that's from personal experience, but it might be. So again, really important to not overextend. And a great way to ask yourself, am I overextended, is to really look at how many commitments are on your plate and ask yourself, does this align with my goals? Am I spending time on the things that are actually important to me? You're going to have to choose. This next one sounds a lot easier because it's much more tactical. You don't have to dig as deep on this one. But one of the reasons you might be struggling with time management is you don't enforce end times. And I see that happen so much. And it's a little bit easier. No, it's not. It should be easier. I was about to say this and I'm like, no, you'd think it was easier with like structured and scheduled meetings at work, but I can't tell you how when I leave my little bubble of my client and my direct team and I go to other people's meetings, I am shocked at how lackadaisical they are about time. And so for you, if you're really focused on time management, you need to enforce your own end times. It's actually a little bit harder when you're running the meeting. Again, you wouldn't think it is, but that will lead into my next tip after this one. Either way, if you're a participant, a facilitator, a listener, just like I talked about in the authenticity episode, which you haven't watched it, go watch the authenticity episode. But just like I talked about in that one, this requires you to set boundaries. So enforcing end times requires you to set boundaries. That is personal life and at work. So if the reason you're struggling to get out the door in the morning is because your husband wants to talk to you about, I don't even know what, his boss or his soccer game or something, you're going to have to enforce ending the conversation so you can get out the door. If you're in meetings at work and the facilitators let those meetings run over, you're going to have to enforce your own end time. And you can say, I have a hard stop, I need to drop. But if they try and talk to you, just be like, let's catch up later and hang up. That sounds tough if you're not used to doing it, but you're giving them a solution. You're not just abandoning them. So if you feel bad, just reassure yourself you're not abandoning them. You're giving them a solution. We can catch up offline. Just leave the meeting. It's the best for you. And that last 5 minutes that they want to talk to you about, you're not going to be paying attention anyway because you're going to be stressed about the meeting that you're late for. So again, just enforce those end times at work, in the meetings you're in, and with your personal life as well. Like I'll have people come over for a meeting at my house, like friends, family, whatever, and they're not telling me what their end time is. And it always cracks me up, and then they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm 30 minutes late for a call. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Like they just lost track of time. So the losing track of time, and then my point about if you're the facilitator, this can be harder, does lead me into my next point about time management, which is a lot of people have poor time sense. And that took me a while to learn because I have a very sharply honed time sense. I think I always had a good sense of time. And then as I was working and again, overcommitting and trying to do too much, I really had to be regimented about my time and focused on how much time is. So time sense is an understanding of how much time has passed, just a gut feel for how much time has passed. And when I'm really on my game and really focused on this at any time of day, even in my personal life, like the workday's over, it's like 4 hours, I haven't been working, I can still tell you regularly what time it is without checking a clock and be right within a couple minutes. And the only reason I'm telling you that is because I didn't realize other people didn't have that time sense until probably 10 years ago. I finally realized, oh, other people, it's not that they know and they're choosing to ignore it and keep talking because it'll be 5 minutes before the end of the meeting. I'm like, why are they still talking? It's time to wrap up. How do they not know that? And they don't know it's 5 minutes left to the meeting. So this is a great skill to hone as the meeting facilitator, which is to either set a silent, unobtrusive alert or alarm on your computer that'll pop up and tell you there's 5 minutes left. Or if you have like a team that you're working with, you can ask someone to keep an eye on the time for you and with you. It's another way to do it if you're not comfortable, like even having that distraction while you're facilitating. It's really important when you're facilitating a meeting that you try to start wrapping up 5 minutes before the meeting ends. And if you have a lot of wrap up, 10 minutes before the meeting ends. And so I'll usually tell everybody, hey, we're going to leave a few minutes at the end of the meeting so we can wrap up. Set the expectation at the beginning of the meeting. And then when it's time to wrap up, people might feel like I still have these super important points to make. And then you just emphasize, okay, great. Then one of our takeaways will be a follow-up. Either we need to schedule a part 2 of this meeting or I'll follow up with you offline and then start the wrap up. Summarize what happened in the meeting, talk about the next steps. That's helpful when you have somebody else taking notes because then as the facilitator, you can make sure they have the same kind of key action items you do. Either way, 5 minutes before the end of the meeting, wrap it up and have something, some system in place so that you're not relying on your own time sense for that. Because again, a lot of people genuinely don't have that strong of a time sense. Really, the more you have that understanding of how long things actually take, the better your time sense gets because you can then understand how much time has passed based on how long those activities tend to take. And then you'll also feel more comfortable setting boundaries around end times and making sure that you're helping to end things early. And all of that is so much easier when you really genuinely accept in your heart that you should be in control of your schedule and not let your schedule control you. So I'm just going to go back to that because I genuinely think that's the foundation of all of this is having that understanding and then empowering yourself to use these different techniques to manage that time so that you can then be better at time management. I hope this helped. As always, I will be writing an infographic that you can click the link in the description box, either of the podcast episode or in the YouTube video. That'll take you to our website with instructions on how to download the infographic. So thank you so much for joining me today on She Makes It Work. Time management is one of my favorite topics. Feel free to ask me tons and tons of questions, either in the comments or go to our website and send us an email. I love this topic and let me know if there's anything else on this topic that would be helpful. Otherwise, look forward to an upcoming episode about productivity in general. Thank you so much. Okay, bye.